Hello and welcome to the 7th edition of the International Festival of Media, hosted and curated by the Faculty of Journalism and Creative Studies, Jagadeesh Lakecity University. I am Areeb Siddiqui, and joining me today on Lakecity Live is a very special guest. BachiKarkaria is a renowned journalist and author, well known for her role as editor of the Times of India. Thank you for giving us your time today, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, my first question, I'd like to ask you about quality investigative journalism. Of course, in the age of digital media, people don't get out on the ground and ask the questions that really matter. So what does quality investigative journalism really entail?
Well, let me tell you that even before digital media, journalists, many lazy journalists didn't go out into the crowd and ask the right questions. But it's really important to ask the right questions, and as important to ask the next question. Because don't just take at face value what somebody has said. Yes, always go with your set of questions, but don't get trapped into that set of questions. If there's an opening and you don't quite trust what the person has said, or even if you haven't understood what that person has said, don't be afraid to ask for a clarification, because only then will you get your correct story.
You have been forthright in using media as a tool for social awareness, and you were a pioneer as one of the first female editors in a newspaper daily in India. So, from when you began your career to the modern day, how has the landscape changed for journalism in India and women in journalism?
Well, it's changed. It's changed a lot, because today, I think today's journalists are far more aware of the world around them, because they have a lot of access to a lot of social media, online, Twitter, Facebook, their own peer group, and very much more exposure to the world around them. It just depends on how much you use that exposure. Are you using it just in your own narrow way? Are you just using it to further your own agendas? Or are you using it to learn? So I think this whole process of learning is what the good has always distinguished the good journalist from the chalu or ordinary, mediocre journalist. And I think that shouldn't change. And it should be reinforced further, because today nobody has, just as no woman or any man has any excuse not to look beautiful, I think today nobody has any excuse not to be informed. So use all these tools. It's changed to that extent, but I think what hasn't changed or what shouldn't change are the old-fashioned values of journalism. That is the importance of honesty, the importance of credibility, the importance of going out and getting your story for yourself, using all the tools that you have. Like we heard at the previous session, ultimately ChatGPT and all of them can give you data, but it cannot capture the feeling that you would get what actually happened, which is why today the person on the spot, the non-journalist with his or her WhatsApp, phone camera, is actually a better journalist than the professional. So, but we should not let the amateur drive out the professional. We have to use the tools of the amateur to improve ourselves as professionals.
Ma'am, you are famous for your satire writing. Satire, is it an excuse, a thinly veiled excuse to speak the truth that nobody wants to hear? And is comedy an effective way in journalism to come to a realization?
Well, it most definitely is, because the point that you can make with humor is far more subtle and actually far more subversive, if you like, than something straightforward. You hit me on the head, with a hammer, or you use the stiletto cut. But the tragedy is that today, are we even allowed to use the stiletto cut? Because Big Brother is watching, and today it's really difficult to use satire for anything that's political, because let me be honest, there are very many more cramps on the profession of journalism, and I really don't know what it'll be to be a meaningful journalist any longer. Certainly writing satire is now fraught with reality.
You alluded to the restrictions placed on journalism in the modern day. India recently fell to a ranking of 161 out of 180 countries in the World Press Freedom Index. Do you feel that press freedom in India is in a compromised position, and do you think it could get worse in the coming days?
Yes, press for freedom is definitely in a compromised position, and I mean, I'm on YouTube, and I hope I can say this because nowadays one is really, really very conscious of this. But yes, press freedom is highly, highly compromised because there are so many levels of censorship that are happening, and you really don't know whom to blame except the very, very top. And every time the court comes up with the fact that, just yesterday, the court came up and said criticism of the government is not an anti-national act. But increasingly we've seen that because the government is now seen to be synonymous with a very, very powerful Prime Minister who's done great work, no doubt. But what is the point of great work if you are not allowed to kind of get the other side, to find out how great that great work is? Because if the public begins to believe that everything is doctored, then even your great work will at some point be open to doubt.
You worked for 30 years in print. However, newspapers and print journalism in general globally is on the decline. India is one of the few countries where newspaper circulation is still somewhat healthy. But you can feel that the era of the newspaper is coming towards an end. Having worked in this profession for 30 plus years, do you feel sad about this, and do you think there's anything print journalism can do about being overtaken by digital media?
No, I don't think I'm skeptical at all because, well, newspapers may, for argument's sake, get out of fashion. But news never is. And ultimately, we are in the process of news. The platform is not important. If I find a platform where I'm putting forward news, why should I worry? Why should I worry about destroying so many forests to have a paper? I can do that while saving the forests and still putting my story out. And I think more than online, more than streaming, I think where the danger lies is that where the public begins to believe everything that they read out in the public domain, social media for instance, because social media has a lot of very personal agendas. And social media is power without responsibility. Yes, social media has dismantled the old news hierarchy. It's kind of, as I said in my earlier session, that very often we might even say that it is as important an invention as the printing press. And really today, what spreads faster, a riot or a WhatsApp message? So the kind of hysteria that goes on WhatsApp can have a great deal of harmful, and it already does. It really, the University of Wikipedia, Dr. WhatsApp, they're all creating their own narratives. So there it is the business of the professional journalists to pull back, not get carried away, not get intimidated by all that, and to say, look, I am giving you the true picture. Because as I said to you earlier, credibility, honesty, doing the story for the right reason, is very, very important.
I'd like to ask you, you spent over 3 decades in this profession.
Much more, my dear man.
Of course, okay. Of course. I'm today's boy. I'd like to ask you, what gives you your drive and your motivation to keep going in a profession as taxing and as journalism? And what can aspiring journalists of today learn who are trying to find their motive?
I think your biggest motive is passion. And it's really, when you say a taxing profession, I think the more taxing it is, the better it is for you to drive you further. And I would say why have I been in this profession for all these years, I think is because I have never stopped learning. And the day I stop learning from a story, I think it'll be the time for me to hang up my boots.
We'd like to thank ma'am once again for her wonderful insight and taking out her time.
Thank you very much.
For more content like this, tune in to Lakecity Live.